Before we get into the hand, Ryan spent the week in Vegas with me and with Michael G. And we had a call from, I forget the guy, Chad Vickers from Saskatoon or Winnipeg or something like that. He gave us a little rundown on all the Las Vegas cash game scenes he played, like in 20 different rooms. Ryan, when you were there last week during the WSOP, which I know is kind of a different animal for cash games during this time, you played in a bunch of rooms, right?
Yeah, I played in a handful. I played in Wynn, Paris, Caesars. Let's see, what else did I play?
Resorts World?
Played at Resorts, and there was one more. Oh, yeah, King's Lounge, too.
And King's Lounge. So you played at regular Paris, which is outside of King's Lounge. You played at King's, you played at Caesars, you played at Resorts World, and you played at Encore. But you didn't play in the little horseshoe room, right?
No, I did not.
And what was your impression of the cash games during the series, maybe in comparison to like your home casino? Because I have always maintained in the past that I don't know why someone would exclusively travel to Las Vegas just to play cash games during the series, because what ends up happening, which makes sense in the poker community, is if you get a lot of strong players and professionals that go to Vegas during the WSOP, that a lot of times your local games kind of soften up a little bit. So whenever a subscriber says, well, I want to go to the WSOP strictly to play cash, I'm like, well, why would you want to do that? Now, if you want to play some tournaments and stuff, that's fine too. But what was your impression of the overall games as compared to home?
Well, I might have just ran good, but all the games I got in were pretty great.
Oh, pretty great. Okay.
Yeah. Except for, I think there was one table at Resorts that was like clearly not a good game. I table changed fairly quickly and was immediately in a really, really good game. So
you table changed in the same size game at Resorts and it got into a good game.
Right. Yep.
And you had played, so when I was recording the podcast 2 weeks ago, you had played 5-10. Actually, there were 3 5-10 tables at King's, and my game was really shitty. And then it broke, right? After I left, I was getting, podcast material. And then your game was pretty good next to me.
Yeah, I think I got some of the players who were a lot of action from, both those tables that broke down. And on top of that, there was a PLO tournament that was going on where people who were busting out of that, who couldn't get into a PLO cash game immediately, they were kind of hopping in and filling seats in our table. And it was definitely a really good table. So
what about like people, like, is it a thing where people like might bust out of a tournament and they're just coming and tilting off their money, or is that like a kind of a urban myth nowadays?
No, I would agree with that. They were, yeah, there was definitely like some steamy action for sure.
There was some steamy action. And which room was the nicest, by the way, just overall?
Definitely Wynn. I mean, you can't top that room.
Well, Encore, it's Encore, right?
Yeah, Encore.
Yeah.
Right. Resorts World was nice though. Also, I mean, besides having to move from that first table, I liked everything I saw there. And then you already had that caller from Caesars, but that is a pretty fun room in terms of, I think, the type of players you get in your lineup. And Paris, I think that's kind of a mixed bag. You're going to have people who are hopping in from tournaments that they bust out, but it seems like you also had people who were maybe cash game grinders who just kind of liked to sit there because it's one of the easiest rooms to get in, like without much of a wait.
Right.
So,
and a lot of turnover, though. I would see that maybe there's a lot of turnover in flipping tables and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into this hand here. This is an interesting one. Now, this is from River Schenectady, right?
Correct.
All right. So what's the size of the game?
It's 2-5.
All right. So 2-5 River Schenectady.
1K cap.
1K cap. Yep. And how deep are you guys?
About 1,700.
1,700 effective. Oh, nice and deep. How deep does this game usually get? I know this is your primary game and you play it like several times a week, right?
I usually play at least 2 nights a week. Most people are buying in close to the full buy-in, but we had a must-move table that was a lot of action, and this guy came from there.
Okay.
Somehow within like less than 2 hours, he was at a 4K stack. So
wow,
he came in extra deep.
But he wasn't like a guy you'd seen before necessarily.
No, total unknown.
Okay. And okay, so and he's going to be the villain in this hand.
Yeah.
All right, started us off.
All right, so I'm opening under the gun +1 with deuce of spades, deuce of clubs.
Hero opens from +1 to what?
$15.
15. Oh, Vegas rubbed off on you or what?
Actually, the game prior to this guy and some of the other must moves filling in, it was rather tight. Like I would say there were 2 people who I considered almost like a dead seat. So yeah, opening a little smaller.
And this is 9-handed.
8-handed.
8-handed. So deuce from +1, 8-handed. I mean, still probably on the books is probably a fold. If the game is not like, if people are not 3-betting anywhere near at the frequency that they are, then obviously you can raise. And then there are some special times when you actually might limp in a very, very live, loose game from up front. You know, a lot of times like drop and rate considerations come into play, but I think a great example of that might be like 1-3 Texas time, where people would just like lose endless amounts of money with top pair in an unraised pot, and you can just get in there for cheap from up front. But I would say kind of on the book, this is a little bit of, probably supposed to be a fold. I mean, I've certainly opened here in this spot too.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there were a couple of the people behind me weren't really. It was like they weren't even playing. Felt more like a 6-max type scenario. But so I go ahead and open that, and we get the hijack to call, cutoff to call, and the big blind calls as well.
Hijack calls, cutoff calls, and the big blind calls as well. And this is, again, if you were saying it was a tighter game and this wasn't typical where you were getting multiple callers, I mean, a small pair is going to play best in a situation that's more shorthanded, like to try to win the pot without hitting a set, and then also to, just in a more shorthanded type of scenario where sometimes you get to show down with a pair versus an ace high. When you're always getting like 3 to 4 to 5 callers, that's when opening small pairs don't make a lot of sense from up front, because now you're in a situation where, well, you're not going to necessarily barrel through, right, as a bluff. Although you are supposed to sometimes take that. But that's kind of what we're looking at here. So hijack calls, cutoff calls, big blind calls, and we're at $60, right?
Yep. And we get a pretty favorable flop. Queen of clubs, 8 of diamonds, 2 of hearts.
Wow. Queen of clubs, 8 of diamonds, 2 of hearts. So it's a rainbow board, right?
Correct.
Now, even before you tell me what happens here, I was just thinking about this before we started the show when I was taking a look at this flop texture. If people want, we've talked, and I know that Nate, who I think will be calling in at the end, I think we did a segment of a podcast about checking as a preflop raiser, which is not check raising, checking as a preflop raiser with a plan to check raise. And this is one of the best candidates to do it with, is when you actually find yourself in a situation when you have raised with somewhat of a small pair from up front and you flop like a hand like bottom set or like middle set, like it was like queen 7 deuce. You want to unblock top pair so that people will stab with the top pair and will continue. So, I mean, it's great. It's great when you raise with a hand like this and you just, flop super thick value, right? Like in a situation like this. But you might want to take a step back and say, oh, like maybe this will be one of the hands where maybe I actually go for a check raise for value. The other thing that I would look at as I thought about this too, Ryan, on paper, is immediately where are you and how many people are to your left? Because this works much, much better if you're from up front, as you did raise, than if you opened from the cutoff, right? And like only the button called and the big blind called or something like that. You have legitimately 2 people to your left here that can bet in a multi-way scenario. So it works a little bit better. I don't know if you were considering that or what, but just something to think about.
Right. Yeah. With two to my left, yeah, certainly could have been an option. But a 4, it was, to me, the big blind decides to donk 25.
Wow. That's always very interesting. Sometimes spots like this, you kind of freeze. It's like, oh my God, like I flopped a set of 8s. I flopped a set of deuces here, and you're like, how am I going to play this? This is great. You're licking your chops. Then all of a sudden something weird happens like this where you get donk light. And for new people, donking is a term that refers to someone leading into the preflop raiser. And it's actually quite an old term, which isn't necessarily, I think it's kind of evolved a little bit, because it used to be, oh, you would never lead into the preflop raiser. That guy must be a donk. So we're going to call this a donk bet. Then there was a time where I used to lead a lot of strong hands because people wouldn't necessarily expect it. Maybe it's turned around here a little bit. Normally, like if you see a situation like this where a guy donks into a board like this for just 25, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to have a strong hand. Now, the problem for you here a little bit is it's unfortunate that you have this happen, because if you kind of want to raise to build a pot up in a situation like this, it just sucks if you get like something like queen jack or queen 10 to fold behind you. But I would still kind of be thinking about what would I do here with a lot of the hands that I was going to see bet anyways, a lot for value. Like if I had, and sometimes as a bluff, like if you were going to do it with like a jack 10 a diamond or jack 10 with a backdoor, 9-10 suit with a backdoor, something like that. Before you tell me what you do, what would you do with like kings, aces, ace, queen here?
I think I would bump it up, but not make it too large to, I want those kind of weaker queens to hang on. So I would tend to bump it up.
So is there any reason to not do the same thing here with deuce deuce?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And that's essentially why I went with what I did, which was I raised to $65. Figured that's not too much, where maybe even people behind me, if they've got something they like.
It's not going to blow a queen out of the water.
Right.
It's not going to blow a queen out of the water. The other thing to note here too is that a lot of times when someone donk leads into the razor, you kind of put them on like a sort of a range of hands. Especially if there's a flush draw, it can be a lot of flush draws. Here, there's no flush draw, though, too. So I don't know what the deal is. You said this is the first time you've seen this guy. I mean, it could be a queen. It's just kind of a little bit of a weird... It's kind of a weird spot. The reason why it's kind of a weird spot, I think, to donk for a guy like this is because a lot of times a queen is somewhat of a static sort of top card, meaning like there's a very good chance if it's this board that a queen's going to remain top pair. So you don't see these guys that are petrified of getting a bad beat, trying to like protect. If it came out 9-8 deuce and they bet out with like ace 9 or 10-9 or something like that. So it's kind of like akin to like someone like leading out on an ace 7 deuce board. If they had a weak ace, like why would they do that? The ace is always going to remain top pair. But I mean, I would start building here. I would definitely start to raise here.
Cool. So hijack and cutoff both fold and comes back to big blind, who doesn't take too long and calls.
So what do you think the big blind has? What do you think his range is here?
I think he's got queen something, but I don't know if it's weak or strong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he completed in the big blind, getting a price. He could certainly have almost all the weak queens, He could have, I mean, the best hand he might have here would be, I think, the obvious one, the queen 8.
The only thing that I would say about your play here, though, too, is that I probably would make it slightly larger now that I look at this. Like, I don't know if like 85, like if you just go like 85, I think you still might get the same calling range here. Just over 3x is 65.
Sure. Yeah, I was kind of thinking that. And almost on every street, there's different bet size options, which, makes it interesting. So depending on what I think the guy has.
Mm-hmm.
I think the logic for the 65 also was that, if it's not too scary of a race, just maybe that somebody behind me sticks around as well.
Or makes a play at it or something like that. All right, so 190 heads up to the turn, okay?
And turn is the 4 of hearts.
So just the brickiest brick in the world.
Pretty bricky, although, I mean, we do bring in...
backdoor hearts. Yeah, queen of clubs, 8 of diamonds, deuce of hearts, 4 of hearts, queen X and 8X of hearts are available, okay?
Right, and big blind checks.
Yep.
I decide to bet on the larger side, 150.
So now hero goes 150, okay?
Big blind decides to raise to 400.
So now the big blind raises to 400 here. So he raises to 400. And obviously, like immediately you think, well, this is a pretty strong line, right? He donks to 25, just calls your raise heads up, and now he check raises here to 400. The one thing of note here, of course, is that he is calling, getting a price. So you could definitely see queen 8 suited, queen 8 offsuit, something like that available for top 2 that might play it this way. You might also see like queen 4 in a certain situation like this as well. Any hand that he thinks beats like an overpair in a spot like this, he could certainly have. He could have 8-8 too. There's 3 combinations of that. You guys started with 1700. So, I mean, I think the play here probably would be to call and evaluate what rivers are with bet sizing. Now, if you knew a guy always was just going to always just stack off here with queen 8, no matter what the situation is, yeah, you could just like, stick it in, I guess. Is there ever, I'm just trying to go like, I mean, this would be really, really like a far stretch if he led with some sort of gut shot that turned like a backdoor heart draw, like Jack 10 of hearts or something like that. I mean, that's pretty rare. But I think the play probably here is to call, I would think. And also, too, I assume you don't think he's got queen here. Remember, it went raise pre-flop. Hero raises, goes call, call, call. We're not going to see a guy in there with like just queen, probably not 3-betting, right?
Right. No, I don't think a guy who's somehow accumulated a 4x starting stack in under 2 hours is the type of guy who's flatting queen.
And then once in a while, and I do see a comment in here from a Darren in the live chat, you won't see it at this level. Once in a while, you see some very, very strangely played aces and kings, like at a 1-2 game, where a guy thinks he's just trapping like pre-flop. He wants to get as much customers as possible. And then no matter what comes, no matter what the situation, he's just going to get it in. That's not normally the case at 2-5.
Yeah, so thinking about this after the hand, I was really curious about if he does have queen 8, queen 4, and he's check raising because he thinks, my
you've got aces or kings.
Yeah, like I have aces or kings a lot. So if I jam here, I probably get a lot of calls.
No, I don't think anybody's check raise folding 2-pair.
Yeah.
Especially when they like with queen 8, which blocks pocket 8s and pocket queens. He could also have queen deuce here too, like the whole Iron hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like the whole discussion of, well, do you ever kind of just ship back if the guy has those hands and he's never going to fold? Or do you just call and kind of see what happens here? Because, I mean, it's very, very hard for you to ever fold here. I mean, maybe if there's some sort of backdoor heart but again, though, like the whole thing, how does he have like queen X of heart? Well, the other thing too is that does a guy ever overplay in such a spot where he thinks like queen 10 of hearts is the nuts here or something like that? Like he turns a flush draw and he's got queen X of hearts here?
Maybe. But I mean, the only value hand I'm really even slightly concerned about would be the pocket 8s that decided to flat in the big blind.
No, of course. I'm just thinking of some other hands that he might deem that are strong in some way.
Yeah, definitely. And also from his perspective too, maybe if he has queen 8, maybe he thinks I somehow have hearts as well. And like my jam
turned a combo draw. Ace 5 of hearts.
Maybe. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you called.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So hero calls. And now we are at almost 1,000. We're at 990. And you guys have about, like 1,200 left in your stack? Something like that?
Yeah, somewhere 12, 13-ish.
Okay. All right. What's the river?
River is the ace of clubs.
Ace of clubs. So the ace of clubs comes here at the end. So the thing that would change here for me, which is sometimes why I sometimes like a call on the turn here as opposed to necessarily and I know like a reflex jam back, is you can suss out a player's like their range based upon what some river cards, how they would affect that portion of their range that you beat. Like, I don't think that queen 8 goes balls to the wall here at the end. You know what I'm saying? Like, different than like if the river was like a 6 or something like that.
Right.
Okay, now what?
Big blind checks.
Big blind checks now?
He checks.
Oh, God. Okay. So what does he have here?
Well, so I can rule out the 8-8 combo.
I would think so.
Always, I think. So the ace, I feel like, is kind of a bad card for me to like really go for max value, because I'm thinking he's putting me on aces or kings or an overpair. So that led me to size down a little bit more than I would have if it was, just a brick.
I don't know, Ryan, because here's my reaction to this is that when he checks, I start to think his value portion of his range is going to be a lot of those two pair that we were talking about. And now, like the Queen X of Hearts bit of this, where he thought like, oh, like I've got a really, really strong hand. We're not trying to milk that portion of his range there anyways. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
So I would just try to target like the Queen 8, Queen Deuce, Queen 4 portion of this and still go like probably like 800. Like, I don't think that those hands, they get scared now, but I don't think those hands are folding.
Right. Well, that is exactly what I bet, actually. I bet 800.
Oh, okay. I thought you said size down.
Well, that compared to what I was planning to bet, that's a bit, I was looking to try to get full stacks in.
So let me ask you this question. What would you have done if he comes out and bets 600 on the river?
I'm just going to jam.
You're going to jam?
I think so, because there's a lot more two pair combos than just the pocket eights. Like there's not really.
Well, here's my only take with this, with the flaw, I think, in your logic is that like, if you were always going to jam blank rivers, why not just jam the turn? If A, we don't think a guy's ever going to fold two pair here. And then B, if the guy's bad enough to think that Queen X of Hearts is a check raisable hand on the turn, I don't think he's folding off there either. If he's got Queen 10 of Hearts. So if I was always going to jam a brick, I very well might consider just jamming back on the turn.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've been thinking about this one quite a bit, wondering if that would have been the best play to get all the money in. And because I definitely felt like there was, it was eating away at me a little bit. Like I missed value on this hand for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I might go closer to pot here. I mean, you go 800. I thought you were going to size down and go like 300 or 400. And I was like, oh, no. So hero bets 800. Okay.
And he took maybe 20, 30 seconds and makes the call. And
obviously you're good, right? When you table your hand.
Yeah.
Do you know what he had?
No, I just turned over after he called. I mean, I imagine it's got to be the Queen 8, Queen 4.
Right. Queen 8, Queen 4. I mean, that would be the only thing that really makes a whole lot of sense. Now, people are saying, like ace, remember, you got to go look at the hand reading of this hand. Somebody in the live chat said ace 5 of hearts. The guy led the flop and then called the raise. It's Queen 8 deuce. The only thing, the two hands that run into aces up that like have hearts here would be ace queen of hearts and ace 8 of hearts. And I don't know if ace queen checks here at the end. It's not like ace queen's going to get scared. It's like a good card. Ace 8 of heart. And again, ace 8 of hearts would have to lead flop into like 4 people and then call a raise. I just think this is a lot of two pair. Again, I think what I would take away from this hand is that if I was going to jam any brick river, then I would have just jammed back on turn.
Yeah.
So
I think it makes sense.
All right, man. Thanks very much for the call. I appreciate it.